It's been a couple months since the epic continuation of the Karate Kid saga Cobra Kai ended, spanning over 6 seasons consisting of 65 episodes over the course of 6.5 years. Alright, that's a lot of sixes. I've been watching this show since it was on YouTube Red in 2018, and I've anticipated every release. In a show that nobody ever thought would be as amazing as it was, we've seen the most corny and over-the-top dialogue, characters, and fights, and that has made us fans and critics fall in love and praise the show so highly, as every season has a 90% or higher on Rotten Tomatoes. Each season has its own unique structure and narrative that makes the season great, as I personally don't believe that there is a single bad season of Cobra Kai. In fact, call me a glazer or whatever, but I don't think any season of Cobra Kai is below a 9 out of 10. Yeah, I said it. It is one of the most rewatchable shows ever made, mostly because of its runtime, but you can legitimately casually turn on any season and it's still almost entertaining as the first time as you watched it. And recently I've rewatched every single season of Cobra Kai, so with this video, I'll be ranking every season of Cobra Kai from worst to best. The criteria consists of the critiques, the good, the storyline, the fights, the writing, and I will list the best and worst episodes of each season. I know season 6 was split into 3 parts and each one felt like its own season, but all of season 6 will be ranked together. So let's start with number 6, dead last, unfortunately being Cobra Kai season 3, released in 2021 with a 9 out of 10 rating. Now it sucks to say that season 3 is the worst season of the series because it's still a great season and it was probably the season I was most hyped for as it was coming out. That was of course due to there being an almost 2-year gap between seasons because of the move from YouTube to Netflix. But unfortunately, season 3 is the worst season for me. The pinpoint reason as to why is simply because it's the recovery aftermath season of the series where not much is really going on. This season follows the ending of season 2 that left Miguel in a coma, Robbie on the run, Kreese controlling Cobra Kai instead of Johnny, the LaRusso family in shambles, etc. Everyone is basically recovering from the school fight in their own way. I feel like a major part that this season lacks compared to the others is an interesting narrative that encapsulates the season and is a bit slower than the other seasons. There isn't really anything in particular that I would say is bad, except for there maybe being no stakes for the season until the very end. We obviously get Daniel and Johnny teaming up to find Robbie, and Miguel wondering if he'll ever walk again, and just the overall threat of Kreese's Cobra Kai growing, but there is no true narrative besides this is how everyone is reacting to what happened after the school fight. Like I previously stated, the narrative of this season is basically everyone recovering from the ending of season 2. Miguel recovers from his injury with Johnny while creating their own new dojo at Eagle Fang. Daniel beats negative PR from the school fight and saves his dealership while visiting Okinawa to find himself again, with Chosen and Kumiko returning. Sam struggles with PTSD from the school fight and is haunted by Tori but overcomes it. Kreese brings in new students like Kyler from season 1 while Hawk fully embraces Cobra Kai and leaves the dojo, but he also questions himself and his decisions. Robbie has a hard time in juvie and eventually gets out but completely ditches Daniel and Johnny, etc, etc. Rewatching the season was definitely a trip down memory lane since I remember being so excited waiting for it to come out, but as I was watching, I was kind of starting to accept that this was my least favorite season. The best way to describe season 3 is the filler season. Every show has one. However, it is probably the best filler season that you can get. There are so many great storylines and moments in this season. The best part of the season is definitely the Kreese backstory, as we finally get to see why Kreese is the way that he is and get background on his war experience, and even getting young Terry Silver appearances in it. Daniel's story in Okinawa is entertaining and emotional with the roles of Chosen and Kumiko as he learns hidden Miyagi-Do moves from Chosen and is able to find himself again. Johnny and Miguel have an emotional and amazing payoff with Miguel relearning how to walk. The Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do rivalry is still entertaining as ever, with Hawk and Sam leading the dojos and maneuvering around the no-fight rules at the school to still sabotage each other. Ali also returns in this season after the tease at the end of season 2, and we get great episodes with her reuniting with Johnny and Daniel. And of course the season ends with Robbie joining the dark side and being a part of Cobra Kai, while Hawk turns good again and joins Miyagi-Do. I thought that Robbie's storyline was handled well in this season despite not really being in it that much, as the writers paced it very well and made great writing decisions for him to eventually join Cobra Kai. This is also one of the darkest seasons of Cobra Kai, as Hawk goes fully overboard by breaking Dimitri's arm and beating the crap out of Kyler's friend Brooks, and Kreese attempts to kill both Johnny and Daniel, and his backstory is dark with him murdering his own captain. Like I said, despite this season being in last place, it's still a really great season. It probably has the best setup to a next season, as the ending of season 3 finally has Johnny and Daniel combining dojos to fight Cobra Kai at the All Valley, while Kreese calls up Terry Silver to recruit him. At the time, this was so high because Terry Silver is the ultimate villain of the Karate Kid universe, so adding him to the next season was going to be very crucial to the story. The ending scene of season 3 is still my favorite ending to a season, with In the Air Tonight playing as Johnny and Daniel finally join forces. As far as the fights this season were great, as we get Daniel and Johnny fighting side by side for the first time, Robbie fighting in juvie, Cobra Kai vs Miyagi-Do at the arcade, the LaRusso house fight, which was just a crazy setting that's almost on par with the school fight, and it includes one of my favorite original songs from the show called Carol of the Cobras. And of course we have Johnny and Daniel fighting against Kreese and Cobra Kai. That brings me to my next point with the best and worst episodes of the season. The worst episode of the season will have to be episode 3 titled Now You're Gonna Pay. Nothing really goes on in this episode except for Robbie getting jumped in prison and Cobra Kai causing more havoc. Not much to say. The best episode is obviously episode 10 titled December 19th, as honestly, this episode is probably the best episode in the series and is my favorite episode. The LaRusso house fight, the final part of Kreese's backstory showing him killing his captain, which was a turning point in his life and helped him get the Cobra Kai name. Ali reuniting with Daniel and Johnny and interacting with Amanda at the Christmas party. Johnny and Daniel fighting Kreese, which has Daniel save Johnny and is still one of the most hyped moments of the show. Daniel and Kreese was probably the most anticipated fight of the series at that point, and it lived up to the hype even though it was so short, as Daniel was on the brink of injuring or even killing Kreese. And of course the ending scene with the dojos combining. Overall though, season 3 is the weakest in terms of narrative, and it really acts as a setup to season 4, a filler season like I said, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Coming in at number 5, we got coincidentally Cobra Kai Season 5, released in 2022, also rated at a 9 out of 10. Now this is definitely the weirdest season of Cobra Kai for me because it's probably the most entertaining season of the show, but it's also the worst written season of the show. Now you're probably wondering how it's not at the bottom because of the writing, but honestly, it's because of the entertainment factor of the season, and the writing isn't horrible, it's just the weakest in the series. This season picks up after the crazy season 4 finale that saw Cobra Kai win the All Valley because of Terry Silver's cheating, Silver framed Kreese for beating Stingray, Miguel running away to Mexico to find his father, Robbie and Johnny finally getting their relationship up off the ground, and of course, Daniel recruiting Chosen to help take down Cobra Kai. Now season 5 after season 3 was probably the most hyped I had been for a season because we were finally going to be able to see how Karate Kid 3 would have gone if Mike Barnes actually beat Daniel and Silver expanded Cobra Kai. Plus I cannot wait to see Chosen interact with Terry Silver and possibly even Mike Barnes, since his return is being speculated leading up to this season. While this was a great season, this is probably the most critical I am of a Cobra Kai season. For starters, the writers make some decisions that I'm not a fan of, and you guys probably know what I'm talking about. Kenny beating Hawk is probably the worst writing decision in this entire show. They knew that Kenny beating Hawk made no sense realistically, so they have Silver teach him a move that guarantees to take his opponent out of the fight. This also takes me to the point that this Cobra Kai team is probably the weakest Cobra Kai team out of all the seasons, and they really aren't threatening at all. There's just a lot of them. Having Kenny, Kyler, and Devin as your top fighters is kinda whack. I don't really include Tori in there because she's working with Kreese the whole season and only stays to help take them down. And of course, if you've seen my Cobra Kai videos, you know how I feel about the Kreese prison break scene at the end of the season, as it was probably the corniest scene that this show has ever done and was the worst ending to a season in the series. The Sakai Takai plot was a good move to introduce, and both dojos get into the tournament, but by the end of it, they just take down Cobra Kai and get Silver arrested, so at the time, this move didn't really make any sense, and it had me a bit scared for season 6, which was crazy because I had never been worried for the next season of Cobra Kai after the previous season. They honestly could have just ended the show here and added another 20 minutes to close out the story, but I'm obviously glad they didn't because this season is at number 5. But even with that, the good heavily outweighs the bad. Miguel's storyline with finding his father doesn't overstay its welcome. Miguel and Robbie finally become friends. Daniel and Terry Silver have a progressive and well-written rivalry that leads to Daniel and Amanda arguing and bringing back the character of Jessica Andrews from Karate Kid 3, who you learn is the person who actually introduced them to each other. Johnny starts his family by finding out that Carmen is pregnant. Miyagi-Do and Eagle Fang are all on the same side with hardly any conflict. Tori finally joins the light side, and Chosen plays a significant role within the season and becomes a fan favorite character. Even Kreese's story in prison is interesting as he reflects on all the major people in his life and he realizes that he does not want to be bad anymore. Like I said, this is the most entertaining season. The fights are amazing as we get Johnny and Robbie fighting side by side in Mexico, Miguel vs Robbie in a full no-rules showdown to settle their beef once and for all, Daniel and Silver square up twice, and their first fight is way more hyped than the second. Johnny and Chosen fight side by side against one of Kim Da-Oo's goons. We even get Chosen vs Mike Barnes, and they do a complete 180 on his character and make him a good guy, which was surprising since everyone thought he was going to team up with Silver again. The brawl with Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai is entertaining as they are trying to expose Silver for cheating, but this is probably the weakest and least memorable brawl of the series. And of course we get Chosen vs Silver in not only a normal fight, but we get a whole sword and sci-fi between them. Realistically, the only reason why this season isn't higher is because some of the writing decisions at the end, because the entertainment factor is there and they just go full anime with both the characters and the fights. The worst episode of the season, however, is probably the first episode, Long Way From Home, as nothing really goes on in this episode except for Miguel's story of finding his father and everyone recovering from the tournament loss. The best episode is definitely episode 5, Extreme Measures, as we get Robbie and Miguel finally making up, the return of Jessica, and Silver and Daniel's fight that was anticipated since season 4. Honestly, if some of the writing was better towards the end, this could have been a top 3 season of the show, because there's never a moment where it gets boring, it has one of the best season narratives, and they have some great storylines that keep you engaged. Coming in at number 4 on the list, we have the hottest take of this video, but Cobra Kai Season 1 released in 2018 with a 9.1 out of 10 rating. Now, I feel like Season 1 is universally known by the fans as the best season of the show, but obviously with this placement, I disagree. In fact, let me make you guys even more mad. I think Season 1 is the most overrated season of the show. Yep, I said it. With me saying that doesn't mean that I think it's bad, as many people misinterpret the word overrated for bad. But Season 1 just isn't the best season in the series. And the only reason why I feel like people say that Season 1 is the best season is because of the nostalgia factor of the Karate Kid, and it was obviously the first season of the show that got us all hooked on it. As I was rewatching Season 1, I definitely did realize how simple it was compared to the later seasons, which is another reason why I think that people say that this is the best season. But the key reason why I don't have Season 1 in the top 3 is because it's probably the least entertaining season out of the 6, and it bases most of its story on Karate Kid parallels and nostalgia. Once again, this isn't completely a bad thing, but I feel like compared to the top 3 seasons, they just do everything a bit better. Now, even with me saying all this, I really don't have many critiques with this season. It's definitely the first or second best written season of the series. The only real critique I can say is that, like I said earlier, it relies a little bit too much on nostalgia, and it basically is a retelling of the original Karate Kid. But I don't know if I could even call that a critique, because it puts its own spin on it, and that's what makes it so good. This whole season is really about getting Johnny's point of view rather than it being Daniel's story, even though he's still involved. The scene where Johnny tells Miguel his side of the story of the original Karate Kid is one of the most genius scenes in the show, because it feeds into that whole Daniel was the real bully narrative and the How I Met Your Mother episode, and his point of view is actually kind of convincing until you remember the amount of details he leaves out. The first episode should be in the conversation as one of the best pilot episodes in television history, as it gets you ready for what's coming and already changes the outlook of Johnny's character after 35 years. Miguel and Johnny's relationship throughout the season is very pure-hearted, as Johnny is put into the role of Miyagi, and you can tell he genuinely wants to help him, which is the same for Daniel when he starts training Robbie. I think the best part of Season 1 is how every storyline ties in with each other by the last episode with the tournament, and it leaves you not really knowing who to root for by the end. You spend the whole season rooting for Johnny and Cobra Kai, but when his students start fighting dirty in order to win, you still want to root for Johnny since he wants to win the right way and he's obviously not like Kreese, but you also understand Daniel more because the cycle continues once again with Cobra Kai's philosophies. Even though I said this was the least entertaining season, I definitely appreciate how it doesn't rely on fights to be entertaining, and there are some major storylines that keep you watching, even if they are somewhat reflection of the Karate Kid. Miguel and Robbie's progression as fighters, Miguel and Sam's relationship journey, the build-up of Hawk and the rest of the dojo, Cobra Kai being banned from the tournament and Johnny having to go in and fight for a spot, Daniel's return to karate and his different ways of trying to take down Cobra Kai, and of course Johnny and Daniel's rivalry reigniting and growing over the course of the season. The ending of the season also gets you excited when Kreese returns and Daniel officially opens Miyagi-Do, which gives an amazing setup for Season 2. Now obviously Season 1 has the least amount of fights in the series, but every fight we do get is important to the story. The cafeteria fight where Miguel beats his bullies is still a top scene in the show, as the payoff is legendary given the context of the bullying. Robbie also stands up to his friends using Miyagi-Do, and it's good to see the progression of his character. And the tournament also intensifies all the rivalries and storylines of the season. The worst episode of the season is probably episode 4, Cobra Kai Never Dies, because it probably just has the least progression of the season, and it's probably the slowest episode. The best episode is obviously episode 10, Mercy, as the Karate Kid parallels go crazy with the tournament mirroring the tournament in the original, while chinning up the story with Miguel defeating Robbie and Johnny not instructing him to fight dirty like Kreese did with him. But he still does due to the rage that he had from previous episodes, and it all just ties in great. Kreese's return also just lets the viewer know that it's really about to get good. Now I'm not going to act like I don't understand why people have Season 1 as the best season, as it is the most grounded and simple and uses Karate Kid parallels while flipping them to make its own story. But I personally feel like the next 3 seasons listed balance the writing and the entertainment better and don't rely much on the Karate Kid parallels and nostalgia to progress the story. It doesn't really get its own identity till the next season, which comes in at number 3, Cobra Kai Season 2, released in 2019 at a 9.3 out of 10 rating. Now this season easily could have been at number 2 because overall this season is amazing. A lot of the other lists I've seen of Cobra Kai rankings and typically fan rankings in general have Season 2 in the 4 to 6 range, and respectfully, I feel like that's BS. I remember when the first teaser trailer dropped for this season with the Crew Summer cover playing in the background, and I was completely hyped for it. Then when we got the full trailer introducing Peyton List as Tori, which was exciting growing up seeing her on Jessie on Disney Channel. Also showing the escalation of the Cobra Kai Miyagi-Do rivalry, and the final shot of the trailer seeing Daniel and Johnny fight was absolutely hype. One of the sole reasons why I have this season at number 3 is because it probably has the best narrative of any season in the series. Cobra Kai vs Miyagi-Do at its peak. The season picks up after the season 1 finale where Miguel and Cobra Kai win the All Valley, Daniel opens Miyagi-Do, and Kreese returns. The common narrative I see with season 2 is that they focus too much on the teens and the relationships, which I can kinda see since the last 3 episodes are about the escalation of the couples in Sam and Robbie and Miguel and Tori. And that's honestly one of the few critiques I have about the season, is that the relationships do feel kinda forced, especially with Miguel and Tori. As rewatching it, they didn't really even fit as a couple, and Tori was just a rebound from Miguel, and you could tell he still wanted Sam the whole time. Robbie and Sam were a bit more organic, since Robbie had feelings since season 1, but it still felt a little bit forced. I also feel like Kreese should have been used more towards the end, as he disappears from episode 8 to episode 10, then takes back Cobra Kai from Johnny with hardly any explanation other than Johnny's handshake deal. Especially since we see him in a shelter in episode 4, then all of a sudden he has the money to take away the dojo. I don't really buy that. And while we all love Stingray, when you truly think about it, his character is kinda dumb in the context of the season. But other than that, I don't really have any other critiques. This season is almost perfect. The storylines with the escalation of Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do are well written, and they progress the story exceptionally. We have the relationships, Dimitri and Hawk beefing because of Hawk embracing Cobra Kai, Daniel and Johnny continuing their rivalry due to Robbie training at Miyagi-Do, and Kreese being back in the picture, the constant growth of Cobra Kai and them sabotaging Miyagi-Do, leading to some Cobra Kai students moving to Miyagi-Do, Johnny meeting up with his old Cobra Kai friends, and the death of Tommy, Miguel's journey of trying to do the right thing while also embracing Cobra Kai. All the storylines just tie in so well, and it's all paid off at the end with Daniel and Johnny fighting for the first time since the original movie and the infamous school fight. Another critique I see with the season is that we're not giving anybody to root for, and I have to disagree with this take as a critique, because I feel that that's the beauty of this season. You kind of root for both sides, because while Johnny's trying to do the right thing, the influence of Cobra Kai's philosophies and Kreese being back in the picture makes people like Hawk and the other students terrorize Miyagi-Do, and it makes it hard to root for Cobra Kai. But Daniel is also trying to get rid of Cobra Kai for the wrong reasons and doesn't really try to understand where Johnny's coming from, and he starts neglecting his family and his business because he's so obsessed with taking down Cobra Kai. But Cobra Kai's actions make it to where you're kind of on Daniel's side, and you understand why he's trying so hard to take them down, because in his eyes, Johnny isn't controlling his students, and the cycle is repeating that he went through. The scene where Daniel storms into Cobra Kai and confronts Johnny after Hawk vandalized Miyagi-Do is one of the best scenes in both the season and the series, because even with Johnny trying to teach his students the right way, Kreese's influence is causing him to give Cobra Kai a bad rep. Like I stated earlier, the build-up of this season in between the dojos is the best part of the season, as everything that happens pushes the story and doesn't feel forced. Everything happening throughout the summer to lead up to the big fight at the school is one of the best writing sequence of events in the series. And speaking of the school fight, let's talk about the fights. I feel like almost every fight in season 2 had a lot more meaning than the fights in season 1. The only fight with more meaning in season 1 is probably Miguel's fight versus his bullies. The mall fight progresses the dojo rivalry and the rise of Hawk. The fights in the forest versus Hawk changes Miguel's character and shows that he's not like the rest of the Cobra Kais. Daniel and Johnny's fight gives us the fight we've been waiting for since the original Karate Kid and season 1. And the school fight still remains supreme as the best fight in the whole show. The camera work on the one-take shot in the hallway is still the most entertaining fight sequence in the series. However, Dimitri beating Hawk was and still is BS. And obviously with the ending of Robbie kicking Miguel over the railing is still one of the most iconic and heart-dropping moments in TV history, as we all definitely screamed, "No!" as it was happening. The finale episode, No Mercy, is also in contention for the best episode in the series, as it gave us amazing fights with Daniel and Johnny and the school fight, and great cliffhangers into season 3 with Miguel's injury, Kreese taking back Cobra Kai from Johnny, and Ali responding to Johnny's Facebook message. It's definitely the best episode of season 2. Worst episode would unfortunately have to be episode 8, Glory of Love, since it bases itself on all the relationships in the show, and there's really no progression with the story of the season besides the relationships. Overall, season 2 is definitely one of the most progressive and entertaining seasons in the series, and it is very underrated. Moving on to number 2, we have Cobra Kai season 6 releasing in 2024 and concluding in 2025 with a 9.3 out of 10 rating. Now this is the most recent season and final season of the show, so it's still fresh in everyone's minds, but I promise this isn't recency bias. This season is definitely split amongst the fan base, as people have it all over the place in terms of the ranking. I feel like this is the most critical that fans are of a season, and most of that is because of the 3-part release format and the writing decisions throughout the first 2 parts, with most fans saying that they hated the first 2 parts, but the third saved the season for them. Admittedly, part 1 is the worst sequence of episodes in the entire series, but I personally feel like part 2 was a 10 out of 10 and is very overhated. I feel like the reason why I put this season in second place is because it definitely flows better when you watch it all at once, and it's the literal perfect ending to this show. I feel like the main reason why season 6 is placed where it is for most fans is because of the 3-part structure, but after rewatching season 6 all the way through, it actually flows pretty well. Now I'm going to try not to go too much into season 6 since I have a review for every part of the season on my channel, but I feel like this season is so overhated. Part 1 is definitely the worst part, there's no doubt about that. Most of it comes from episodes 4 and 5 with the writing decisions for characters regarding the Sekai Tekai preparation. Part 1 is probably the most critical section that I am of any Cobra Kai season, but even with that, it's still an 8 out of 10 and it's not bad television. It's just not as good in Cobra Kai standards. Some of the character writing with Daniel, Johnny, Hawk, Dimitri, Devin, Kenny, and Miguel are all just annoying. We also get some weird writing regarding Kreese and some of his scenes are just unrealistic. Plus the addition of Kim Sung-young was just unnecessary considering that he's at least 100 years old and somehow is still alive. Even with that, the part is still good with Tori's storyline and her mother dying, which leads her back to Cobra Kai. The return of Mike Barnes, the kids gearing up for their futures and training for the tournament, Sam and Tori finally making up after 4 seasons, the introduction of Quan, and of course the Miyagi backstory, which I thought was the best storyline of part 1, especially after finding out that Miyagi fought in the Sekai Tekai. The fights are also cool in the context of the part with the frat party fight, Mike Barnes vs Johnny, Miguel vs Robbie, Tori vs Sam, Quan's 3 vs 1 fight. Then we shift into part 2, picking up where we left off, where Miyagi-Do is stunned by Tori's decision to join Cobra Kai again. And like I said, this part is very overhated, and I feel like fans nitpick the issues with this part and group it with part 1 when it's significantly better than part 1. The only issues I can really pinpoint with this part is that we get no explanation as to how Tori even got to Spain and found the time and money to link back up with Kreese when she legitimately has a little brother at home and her mom just died. And the fact that they breezed past Kreese's charges getting dropped off screen, which made the ending of season 5 a lot more stupid. But legitimately, other than that, part 2 is so much better than part 1, and it's perfect. Cobra Kai completely messes with Miyagi-Do's head in the tournament and throws him off in every aspect on the world's biggest stage. I absolutely love how they make it to where Cobra Kai isn't the only threat to them and bring in the Iron Dragons, which end up being linked to Terry Silver, which is revealed at the end of episode 8, and it doesn't feel forced at all. The writing is amazing, as I didn't even expect Terry Silver to come back, and they fooled us with Daniel's kidnapping plot and made us think that it was Kreese behind the attack by bringing back an unknown character that worked for Silver in Karate Kid 3. Daniel struggles with finding answers on Miyagi and ends up finding out that Miyagi killed someone in his Sekai Tekai stint, which leaves him stuck, and it is amazing because it gives us a human side of Miyagi. Other than that, we get an escalation between the kids as Robbie is broken over Tori and isn't really fighting to his best ability, and leaving Miguel to get upset at him. Hawk and Dimitri still battle over their college complications, Devin is torn over what she did to Kenny, and Miyagi-Do as a whole just struggles, which I love, because Cobra Kai as a show just tends to focus on the main kids and having them dominate, but they focus on the other dojos and make it feel like it's really a world tournament. And with the world tournament, we get the fights, which are some of the best in the series. The Cobra Kai vs Miyagi-Do opening group stage fight, Miguel's 2v1 platform fight, the various tag team fights, Robbie vs Quan, and of course the dojo brawl at the end. In my review for part 2, I said that the dojo brawl was the best fight in the series, but I lied. It's second though. We literally see every character fight against and alongside each other, and it was a great payoff with the build-up of the rivalries over the course of the 5 episodes. And Quan's death is still the most impactful and unexpected moment in the show. Yes, more impactful than Miguel's injury in season 2, because they went there and killed a kid in a crazy way. That cliffhanger leads us into part 2 of season 6, which I hardly have any critiques about, and it's just a perfect closure to the series. The only critiques I can say is that some of the realism in this part is lacking with the first 2 episodes, but other than that, this is the perfect ending to this show. Quan's death is a pivotal moment for Kreese and helps him apologize to Johnny and have a redemption arc when he saves Johnny from Silver's craziness at the end, and they both die in a poetic way with one final fight. This also gives us amazing scenes with Kreese and Johnny, which leads to Johnny's Cobra Kai being brought back with Miguel and Tori fighting as his students as they win the Sekai Tekai, which leads to the Sensei Showdown tiebreaker. Daniel's character is at his peak as he finally accepts that Miyagi wasn't perfect and that this fight is not his battle anymore, so he puts all his Miyagi bias aside and helps train Johnny and even dons the Cobra Kai gi in support of him. He also gets a payoff with the Miyagi plotline as he finds out the truth about him robbing and beating someone and that he only did it to get his wife's necklace back. Johnny beats Wolf in the Sensei battle and he gets a complete redemption from the original movie as he ends the show with a family and a better version of Cobra Kai after being a drunk to start the show. The kids all have great endings with their futures, and this show is just closed out in a perfect way with literally every single major character. The fights in this part were poetic and amazing as well, as Robbie does amazingly versus Axel before his injury, Tori defeats Zara by embracing Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do and dominates, Miguel remembers everything that he's learned over the course of the show to defeat Axel, and Johnny steps back and defeats Wolf by also mixing Miyagi-Do and his Cobra Kai philosophies. The show ending with the future generation of Cobra Kai also learning Miyagi-Do through Daniel is poetic and redeems not only Johnny but the Cobra Kai dojo as a whole. I know I broke this season down by the parts, but when you put it all together, it is an amazing display of everything we love about Cobra Kai, and it paces and flows better than the individual parts. Season 6 is way too overhated and underplaced, as I feel like many people let parts 1 and 2 define their whole outlook on the season, even though part 2 is so much better than people give it credit for. Part 1 is the only real issue in my eyes, and even that part is still rewatchable and entertaining. The worst episode of the season would probably have to be episode 4 titled Underdogs, which is a very entertaining episode, but it's one of the worst written and infuriating episodes in the show, and makes a lot of terrible decisions in one episode. The best episode is obviously episode 15, X Degenerate, as we just close out this show perfectly, and Johnny is redeemed from being one of the biggest movie villains ever to the most loved character in the entire franchise. Episodes 13 through 15 are easily the best span of 3 episodes in the show. Absolute cinema. But wait, there's still one more ranking. Every season of Cobra Kai has its own narrative and flow that makes it great despite the ranking, but the season that I feel does best with the overall narrative, fights, storylines, writing, and characters is none other than the #1 best season of Cobra Kai Season 4, released in 2021, being the only 10 out of 10 rated season in my opinion. This season is the most underrated season in the series, and I don't hear people talk about it enough at all when it comes to the best seasons of Cobra Kai. This season legitimately is perfect. If it's not Season 2, then Season 4 has probably the best narrative, with the All Valley being at the centerpiece of ending the battle between Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do. But the stakes get even higher with Terry Silver finally being introduced into the mix. This picks up after the satisfying ending of Season 3, where we finally saw Daniel and Johnny combine their dojos and Robbie turn to the dark side. The hype for the season after the Season 3 finale was at an all-time high, and I know that I've been saying that I was the most hyped for almost every season, but this season had the most hype by far because it was the first official Netflix film season, and we knew that Terry Silver was coming. It was confirmed with his own teaser, which just made everything so much more hype. That's how important Terry Silver is to this franchise, as he is a better and crazier villain than Kreese. The promo for this season was amazing as well, as they were really trying to hype us up for the All Valley and Terry Silver's return. The Season 4 trailer with Rock of Ages playing in the background is still my all-time favorite Cobra Kai trailer because the hype was just unreal. The only real critique I can say about this season is that Daniel and Johnny broke up the dojos a little too fast, and it did kind of suck to see them fighting on opposite sides of the tournament. But that's literally the only critique of the season that I have, and even then, that's hardly a critique because it makes sense in the context of the season. Season 4 is the most well-written and well-paced season in the whole series. It starts with Terry Silver getting Kreese's call from the end of Season 3, and he immediately declines it and goes a couple episodes refusing to reunite with Kreese until he's eventually pulled back in. Terry Silver's reintroduction in this season is so well written because he's not evil at all to start the season and wants to win the tournament the right way, but Kreese starts to treat him worse and worse as the season goes along, and it just makes him more and more unhinged until he just turns into Karate Kid 3 Silver by the end of it all. Daniel and Johnny's conflict, while annoying, is completely rational since Johnny is unaware of Silver's evils, but Daniel is, so it makes them both lose sight of the plan and split up before the tournament. Before this though, we get a couple of episodes of them teaching each other styles of karate and hanging out as friends, and it is so entertaining to see. We also get great stories with the kids. We see the introduction of Kenny, and it shocked me so much when they reveal him as Sean's brother, who was the guy in Season 3 that was bullying Robbie and Juby. He is mentored by Robbie, which gives them both a great story. Kenny's journey is entertaining as he is similar to Miguel in the way that he is being bullied while still being trained until he eventually gets his get back on his bullies. Except that he goes full dark side by the end of the season, which directly ties into Robbie's story and makes him realize that Cobra Kai isn't the way and that he only went there in spite of Johnny. This was the moment where I started to like Robbie's character because he finally lets Johnny into his life to fix their issues at the end. Miguel also has a journey of realizing that even with the father figures of Johnny and Daniel in his life, he still doesn't know his real father, and the scene where drunk Johnny mistakes Miguel for Robbie after he helps him is just heartbreaking. The build-up of his story is amazingly written, as there is multiple occurrences of subtle foreshadowing that happens in the story that causes him to leave the tournament to find his father in the end. I also love Sam's journey wanting to embrace both Miyagi-Do and Eagle Fang, and she is completely on demon timing towards Tori the entire season. It makes her a great fighter in the tournament. And speaking of Tori, this is a season where her character starts to do a complete 180 as you actually start to feel bad for her and you're interested in her storyline. I like the relationship with her and Amanda as she helps Tori get back into school. You start to realize that Tori was never really evil, she was just broken. Hawk's character arc is complete by the end of the season as he has his identity stripped from him when Cobra Kai cuts off his mohawk, but he prevails through Miyagi-Do and beats Robbie and the boys All Valley. All the stories and character arcs are so well written, and this season is the peak writing of Cobra Kai. Even Anthony is brought back into the story as he is the one who bullies Kenny with his friends, and we get a different perspective of Miyagi with him as he is known as LaRusso Jr., but he is the one person in his family who doesn't really understand the obsession with Miyagi because he never really knew him. There aren't as many fights in this season as compared to the other seasons since they saved the fights for the tournament, but the fights we get are some of the best fights in the show. Robbie takes down all of Cobra Kai in episode 1 to prove himself. The Daniel and Johnny rematch in episode 5 is absolute peak as they knock each other out, which symbolizes that they are both equal fighters. We get a 2v2 fight between the couples in the prom in Miguel and Sam and Tori and Robbie. We even get Silver versus Johnny, and seeing Johnny use Miyagi-Do defense for the first time against Silver was so hype watching it for the first time. And we eventually get to the tournament, and even though the Sakai Takai was cool, the Season 4 All Valley tournament is still the best tournament in the entire franchise, including the Karate Kid movies. The stakes were so high for this, and it was so cool to see Kreese and Silver side by side again at a tournament. And you truly didn't know who was gonna win. Miguel's fight versus Hawk is great for how short it is, and Miguel presumably re-aggravating his back injury was one of the most heart-dropping moments of the series and had everyone shocked when watching it for the first time. Hawk and Robbie's final fight is probably still the best one-on-one fight in the series, since they are both evenly matched and are unable to get points on each other, which leads to overtime where Hawk gets the win. The choreography alone makes this the best one-on-one fight in the series, since Tanner Buchanan and Jacob Bertrand actually did all their stunts for this fight. And even though it was kind of obvious that Hawk was going to win since we still had Tori and Sam after this fight, you still didn't know who was going to win in the moment because of how climactic the fight was. Then Tori and Sam have an even more climactic fight since this fight decides the winner, and we have Daniel and Johnny team back up to mentor Sam with Miyagi-Do and Eagle Fang all on the same side. Tori unexpectedly gets the win fair and square, until we later find out that Silver paid off the rest so that Cobra Kai won, which was one of the most unexpected moments in the series at the time. It gets even worse when Silver frames Kreese for beating Stingray in episode 8, and the hype for season 5 was crazy as we were preparing for the reign of Silver and the return of Chosen coming to help Daniel take down Cobra Kai. The way everything fell in line with the last couple of episodes was some of the best display of writing in the show. With this being the best season, it's hard to even choose a worst episode, but since I have to choose, it'll probably have to be episode 3, Then Learn Fly, which is still a great episode, but all we really get is Daniel and Johnny training each other's kids with their methods, and Kenny officially joins Cobra Kai. The best episode is obviously the finale, The Rise, because we get all of the great fights and storylines to go into season 5, but episodes 8 through 10 was the best 3-episode span of the series until episodes 13 through 15 of season 6 were released. Overall, season 4 is the absolute peak of Cobra Kai, as they have so many compelling storylines with almost every character, the fights are all meaningful and have purpose, the writing is top tier, and the pacing is great with every episode feeling important to the story. And that was my ranking for all 6 seasons of Cobra Kai. It's still crazy that this show is over. This video was so hard to do because I legitimately love all these seasons. All of these seasons were my favorite at one point in time because of recency bias, but as I sat down and watched every one of them, it was way harder to rank than I thought. One thing I noticed was that the top 3 consisted of the even seasons of 2, 4, and 6, and the bottom 3 consisted of the odd seasons of 1, 3, and 5. And that made me wonder, which era of the show was better, the YouTube era or the Netflix era? Now, seasons 1 and 2 were the only YouTube released seasons, but season 3 was written, filmed, and funded under YouTube, and released under Netflix because of the cancellation, so I still somewhat count season 3 as a YouTube season. Season 4 and on were fully written, filmed, and funded through Netflix, so that would be considered a Netflix season. And honestly, just based on the placements and every other aspect I discussed, I gotta give it to the Netflix era. Now, the YouTube seasons were definitely better written and more simple, and I see why a lot of people say that the YouTube era was better because of it. But I personally feel like the Netflix era gave the show a bigger stage to shine. It was almost equally as well written, but the entertainment factor of seasons 4 through 6 give them the edge for me because it's a better balance of the two. And this video may seem like I'm just hating on the earlier seasons of the show, but I think people just act like the earlier seasons were so much better than the later seasons, and I just heavily disagree with it. But hey, we all have opinions, and I know my list is probably different from yours, and I want to hear them in the comments, so let me know. When Karate Kid Legends comes out in May, I'll probably do a ranking video ranking all the Karate Kid movies, including the Jaden Smith remake, and I think that'll be a fun video to do, so I'm excited for that. But I'll do it for the next one, and if you enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.